Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, or if you're new here, welcome. It's always a pleasure to meet somebody new. Today I have another rare game experience for you guys, and if you're new to this is kind of where I go into the rare, the odd, and often bizarre world of video games, looking for those truly rare experiences. Today, like many days, we go back into the realm of the arcade, in the early days of it in fact. This one to find a game that I'd wager many of you have seen or heard of, or maybe not, as there weren't really that many made, because today we're going to go back into the world of vector graphics, and a game called Sundance. So if you're up for it, grab a snack and a drink and hang out a while as we dive into the arcade again. Now, Sundance was developed and published by a company called Cinematronics. Don't worry if you haven't heard of them, I hadn't either. Now, they were primarily working from the late 1970s into the early 1980s and focused primarily on vector graphics games. This was a popular graphical style in the early days of video games that used geometric shapes defined in a Cartesian plane. Or in more layman terms, it meant using lines, points, curves, and polygons to make graphics. Sounds sort of like polygonal graphics from the 1990s, but it's slightly different. As a matter of fact, you could probably think Star Wars Arcade or something akin to, say, Asteroids. Those are some pretty basic examples of this. Now, this game was developed in much the same way as those other games, so what did it look like and how did it play and how many were made, said no one in particular. Well, let's dive in and have a look and see if we can pin down any of that, shall we? Sundance on the surface was a pretty simple game. The board consists of two 3x3 grids in which these little suns bounce back and forth. Your objective is pretty simple. Open the hatches on the bottom grid in order to catch the suns as they bounce back and forth. There are no enemies attacking you, just the constant forward march of time as the counter would slowly count down on your game. So your only goal was to catch as many of the suns as you could in a limited amount of time provided. Now, like many games in the early days of the arcade, Sundance had what we can call a unique control scheme. You see, in the early days, most arcade games and units would have anything at all. You could have dual control sticks, spinners, dials, all the way to just buttons for interfacing with the game. It really and truly was the Wild West of video gaming, in part because the industry was so new, with the first game, Computer Space, only having come out in 1971. So nobody really had any thoughts to standardizing, and pretty much anything and everything could, and sometimes did work. This cabinet was no exception to this kind of unique control scheme. However, in my opinion, this is actually probably one of the best designed ones for this kind of game, at least to allow for the most efficient play. You see, in the center were your basic selection options, the number of players, 1 or 2, and an option to either show grids or not, which honestly seems kind of odd, but maybe that applies some sort of point modifier to your score. On top of that, you can select beginner, which would have 2 suns on the board, intermediate, which would have 3 suns, and expert, which would have 4 suns. It also had this odd keypad and button beside it. This is where the real genius comes in, at least in my mind. Each one of these 9 buttons corresponds to a grid location, opening a hatch for the suns to go into. Yep, simple and to the point. My mom would have been amazing at this game. She was always super fast with those old calculators and number keypads on the keyboards. And I don't say that in jest, because that's exactly what this reminds me of. Being fast at keying in those numbers would make you very, very efficient at hitting the right hatch to rack up as many points as possible. On top of this, you also had a Nova button. This basically blasted everything off the screen if it was getting a little too crazy for you to handle. I couldn't find out if it just cleared the screen and took you to the next stage, or if it gave you all the points for destroying all of them, or what. Honestly, finding anything in this game was, well, as usual for this channel, not always easy, and I'll tell you why. You see, this was not a super reliable cabinet, at least according to Arcade Blogger, whose link I'm actually going to put in the description below, because wow, what a story that was. It's a really good read, seriously, go read it after the video. Apparently, this game had low production runs, somewhere around like 1,000 cabinets, which even for the time was pretty small. On top of this, it had a lot of manufacturing issues. particularly on the monitor side. Reportedly, the failure rate on the monitor was around 50%. Well, at least the other half is solid, I hear you saying. Not so much. The circuitry itself was also a little suspect and would often short out as a result. Tons of these were just pulled out of arcade floors pretty fast, leaving very few surviving units. To give you an idea, out of the 1,000 produced, somewhere between the range of 3 to 10 are still in existence, making this, like many others, one of the rarest cabinets to exist just due to manufacturing issues alone. However, what do you guys think of this one? Had any of you ever heard of Sundance before, and if so, where? Did any of you ever see one in the wild and play it, and if so, where? Can you think of other super rare games I should cover on the channel? If so, leave them in the comments or reach out to me. Contrary to popular belief, I actually do take notes of each one of these and try to look at them at a later date. If I lose them, I apologize, but I do my best. However, for now, thank you so much for taking time out of your day and spending it with me. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and until we meet again, happy gaming!